All right. So let's jump in. So last week we talked about, uh, we've been talking about our plan and our values. And this week last week we talked about laying hold of God, right? What does it look like to lay hold of Him? And this week we're going to talk about we lay hold of the treasure that God is. How do we then cherish that treasure? How do we hold it in high esteem? And how does that sort of leak out into every area of our life? So I want to start. We're going to be going to the parables again in Matthew 13. If you want to, we'll have the main text on the screen. But if you want to go on your Bible or Bible device, you can go ahead and go there. But I want to go ahead and throw up this picture. Uh, this is the Abernathy pearl. Now, I'm not a pearl person, but I thought this was interesting because if you understand, I don't know that there's a good comparison for size, but this is a a pearl, right? So it's like it would fit here between my fingers. Take a guess. This is considered. It was rated by people who do those things as flawless. It's like extremely rare. It just recently sold. Somebody take a guess. No, actually, it's it's way less than that. But I'm thinking like I collected marbles, right? Like this is the size of a marble, but like you can buy a whole bucket of marbles for like $1, right? $115,000. Like for this one little pearl. And one of the things that determins that, right, is like, it's flawless. Like so there's not others that compare to it. It like it's literally rated that there's no imperfections. I'm sure there are lots of pearls available and they're graded on different, things, but the other thing that determines its value, my father growing up had this saying, something is only worth what somebody will pay you for it. Right? So I've got this nice, beautiful iPad up here, right? If I told you all, hey, I'm going to sell this today for $10, probably every one of you would be willing to. But if I said, I want $5,000, you say, no, I can go buy a new one for, less than a fourth of that, right? It all is based on what someone is willing to pay you for. See, that's how value is placed, right? So today we're going to go to a familiar parable. It's a really short, just a couple of verses about the pearl of great price. And we're going to begin to look at that. So go ahead and flip with me if you want to Matthew 13, verses 45 and 46. And we looked at 44 last week, which is, some of these parables are just like almost like bullet points, just different. And if you remember, we said before, these parables are not just metaphors, right? Like when we looked at the treasure last week, we said God is not like a treasure, God is the treasure, right? So these are things that are telling us something more than just metaphorically. Okay, verse 45 says again, because we just read the one we read last week, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant on the lookout for choice pearls. When he discovered a pearl of great value, he sold everything he owned and he bought it. Now, a couple of things I want to point out here. First off, for us in our culture, in our moment, choice pearls, this is someone who understands the grading system, right? Like, this is someone that, like, he can look at a pearl and see things that I would never see. You put a whole pile of them down on a table, I might not know the difference between one or the other. This is someone that's their life's work. And it's like he immediately recognizes the value. Now, I also just have to help us here with some language, because I'll be honest, when I hear the words great value, I think of a brand from Walmart, right? Or if my wife comes home and says, I've been to the Goodwill and I got a great deal or a great value. So I'm just pausing here because that's where my mind went, and I don't want us to miss the meaning. They're not talking about a bargain. They're not talking about They had a really good coupon because that's kind of our culture, right? Like we're looking for a discount. This is not a discount situation. This phrase that he discovered a pearl of great value means he discovered one of high value. Just like the Abernathy pearl that we looked at, like it's the one. It's not even really comparable to the others. And the truth, and you helped me demonstrate it when I asked you for prices, like we're all over the map, right? It's like there's no comps. Like my wife and I have been in the process of buying a house, and so we've been looking, oh, what's this house worth? We'll look at the comps, right? What's comparable? This pearl doesn't have something that's just quite comparable. And it has a high value. Well, he's saying here that the kingdom of heaven is like that. That what we're searching for, if we can find it, it's of incomparable value. Like the value is so high and there's nothing to compare it to. This is one of the things that we want to do as a community of Jesus people located here in the Heights is we want to cherish what we value most. And that's what we're going to look at today. As just, again, as we talked about last week, laying hold of God. God is not just something to get, and then what do we do with him? Like, what do we do with this relationship? We cherish it. And that's what we're going to look at today. Based on the value and things, we want to cherish what we value most. And just to make this super practical, we've already experienced that some here this morning. As a community of Jesus people, we value interacting or engaging with God through the process of worship. It was often said in the early days of the Vineyard that if we're looking for the power of God, not power like the world defines it, right? But if we're looking for the power of God, it's found in his presence. Right? It's not achieved the way the world says it is. The power of God to make a difference, to change things, to redeem the world, to save our souls, to make us into people that look like him, that power is in his presence. And that's one of the places that we go. Worship is a place that we go where it's just us and God. Right? And yes, music is a great vehicle to help our scattered senses get recentered, but the music is not the focus. He's the focus. Getting in touch with, engaging with his presence and trying to find that place where it's just you and him in intimate relationship. I already touched this a little bit, but just to make sure we establish this, high price can also be high value, right? So it's not automatic. I had a history teacher when I was in school, and he admitted one time that he and his wife kind of regularly had an argument because if he went to go buy something, he would, no matter what it was, say a TV, for example, he would walk into Sears. Sorry, that might be a dated reference now, but that's where I worked in college, so he would go into Best Buy or wherever, and he would automatically say, I want the most expensive one because it's the best. Now, we know in the consumer electronics world, that's not necessarily true, right? But his philosophy, and he believed it with every fiber of his being. Whatever I'm going to buy, as long as I can afford it, I'm going to get the highest price one because that's the best. But the truth is that it can be true that sometimes the higher the price means higher the value. And this is what we see in this story with the pearl merchant, is that he sees this pearl and he recognizes the value is so high that it's worth selling everything that and you have to imagine, like, some of the other pearls he's collected they're not throwaways. They're probably pretty good. But he says the value is so high, it's worth paying this astronomically high price to get it. And in the same way, in the kingdom of heaven, if God is our treasure, if this intimate relationship that makes a real difference in our lives is valued the way that it should be, it's worth paying the cost of surrendering all of who we are to lay hold of it. Saying, God, I don't really have much that compares to what you're worth, but you have said that what you want is for me to give up my life. And it's worth paying that price because the value is there. In terms of the pearl example, God is flawless. Like, his value is beyond compare. We read that over and over again in the scriptures. Nothing compares to him. Like there's how many of you know that the devil is not God's opposite? Right? Like we can get, it's easy to get that idea, right? Because there's the whole idea of good versus evil and light versus darkness, and those realities are in play with the two different kingdoms, but the devil is not the opposite of God. There is no one who can rival God. No one can challenge him. No one can be compared to him. There's not even room in his category for some other created being to be there. He is beyond compare. And so that means that if I can have a relationship with someone that's in their own category, that created the heavens and the earth, that made all things good and right, and has since the fall been about the work of redeeming and putting things back the way they were made to be, then the value of that relationship is also beyond compare. Like, I don't even know how to state it, but the value that comes to me for having that relationship is just beyond. It's eternal, meaning that it stretches into time, and it's beyond what I could possibly think or imagine. Now, here's the key, because we know that it is easy, in one sense, to lay hold of the relationship. God said, I sent my son to pay the price so that I could have my kids back in relationship with me. And that's an open door. It's a free gift. Most, if not all of us in this room, have laid hold of that gift. We have a relationship with Jesus, but just laying hold of it is not enough. We need to cherish it. And one of the things that happens when we cherish it, when we constantly recognize the value and we press in, is that our life decisions begin to reflect that cherished relationship that we have with the Holy Spirit. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where this begins to become practical. And we move from just saying, I've checked a box to know where I'm going when I die, to no, I'm going to actually live a kingdom life now. I'm going to value this relationship with the Holy Spirit in such a way that it actually affects the day-to-day decisions that I make in my life. Now, I don't know what that looks like for you. You start wherever you're at, right? But my point is, for people who have laid hold of a relationship with God and are cherishing it and are trying to follow Him, it should look different than folks that are not doing that. And mercy triumphs over judgment. I'm not about condemn. Everybody is on their own journey, right? But it should look different. It should make a difference on not only what decisions we make, but how we make decisions. We're not going to go fully into this for sake of time this morning, but if you want to just jot down Mark 10, 17 to 22, it's the story of the rich young ruler. Now, I just want to touch over this briefly. But if you know the story, this young man who is very wealthy. He's done very well in life. He's amassed a lot of tangible goods and wealth. And he comes to Jesus and says, Jesus, I've done all the things that the law requires, but how can I lay hold of eternal life? And Jesus looks at him, and I'm paraphrasing this, but Jesus looks at him and he sees him, he cherishes him, and invites him into relationship. But what he asks of him is be willing to give up everything that you have in order to lay hold of what you're asking for. And the young man couldn't do that. He couldn't value that relationship high enough to be willing to let go of everything he had. Now, the point in this story is not that we all need to go, empty our bank accounts and dump it in the ditch. But it's being willing to give everything that we have, tangible and intangible, to God as He pleases, recognizing that it's His. But in order to do that, there is a level of our will that's involved. We must willfully choose and we must willfully cherish our relationship in our whole life. Now, I mean that both in terms of from now until the day I croak and in every area of my life. I don't know about you, but it's really easy to give God certain things, right? But there are parts of my life where it's like, God, it's going to be a little uncomfortable to let go of that area. I'm kind of afraid, I'm just being honest here. I'm kind of afraid you might mess it up because it's kind of comfortable and I wouldn't mind just leaving that part alone. Am I talking to anybody? I know I'm talking to me. If we cherish the relationship with God, we've got to be willing to give Him anything He asks for. And I sort of mentioned this last week, but it's like, I'll be honest, it will mess you up. It will make you uncomfortable. It will challenge you. It will be difficult. But is anything worth sacrificing for not going to be a little bit difficult? Like, is it not going to require challenge? But is Jesus not worth that sacrifice? I can't help but going back, like, I know what my life looked like when I tried to do it my way. And it's not better than it is now. And my hope is that the more and the better will keep increasing the more I say, yes, Lord. Yes. Whatever you're asking. And I've talked about this before, but I'm just going to mention it. There may be specific times in your life. My wife and I have had at least 2, maybe 3, where to lay hold of what God has for us next, we've literally had to give up everything. I mean, talking like everything. And that doesn't always mean literally selling, although in one of those instances, we pretty much sold down to what we could put in a backpack. We've been there, right? But it's the willingness to let go. And friends, I'm right there with you that like that is a scary thing. It's a scary thing to take what you think is stable and solid and feel like God is asking you to let go and you don't know what's going to come next. You don't know what it's going to look like. If we cherish this relationship, we have to do that. We have to allow Him to prove Himself trustworthy. Because the other side of this coin is that I can just testify, and I know many of you can, I've never done that and had Him come up short. I've never let go and then received from Him something that was less valuable than what I let go of. Now, it was uncomfortable. It was scary. I'm not saying that I always did it joyfully. But what God gives is better than anything I could hold on to. And we want to cherish that. I'm going to go back to this statement that I made towards the beginning. We want to cherish what we value most. And that's one of the things that I've been praying into and inviting us into in this new season of ministry is how can we more cherish? How can we better cherish the thing that we value most? And I hear it every week worded in different ways. The thing we value most is the presence of God. Like, now, many of you came in, so the crowd, like, but I have to tell you, like 5 minutes before the service, we were like, is it just going to be us and the volunteers? Like, it was a little thick, and I understand I'm not, if you've been around me very long, you know, I am the last thing from the attendance police. That's not how we operate here, right? But, you know, other times I've had people say, you know, well, as long as God shows up, who cares? Right? And that doesn't mean that we don't care about people, but it's not about our purpose as a church is not to just to gather people in a room to have an event. Our purpose is to meet with God, to have his presence invade our lives in a way that it makes a difference, in a way that it changes us. And so that's what we want to cherish. We see him do that every week when just like we did today as we come together and worship. And it also helps us cherish relationship with each other because as we have shared experiences with God, our relationships with each other grow. Back to our mission statement, that helps us build communities of hope. And communities of hope to me just looks like people with shared experiences that understand no matter what your circumstance looks like, there is a God of hope. And he is for you, and he is in you, and he is about the business of multiplying and unleashing hope to everyone that you come encounter with. That's what we're here to do. We're not here to host a Sunday meeting just so we can say we gathered some people in the room and check some boxes. We're here to meet with God, to get filled up, to get changed, and then go out as change agents into the world, wherever you have influence, and unleash hope. Build relationships with people. Engage them with Jesus' love and power. Last thing, and we're going to wrap this up for this morning. This phrase that we use around here from time to time, everybody gets to play. That's one of our values. Everyone gets to play simply means that all of these things that I'm talking about are for all of us. Not just for the pastors and leaders and whoever might have certain labels or titles. Those things are organizational, right? But they're not worth much in the kingdom scheme of things. Everyone gets to play means that no matter where you are in your life, you have the same spirit, and all that God is asking is a willingness, a yieldedness to be a change agent, to be a hope person that can go and unleash hope in the world. I don't have time to do this today, but I'm just going to throw this in or cast this as a vision for the future. One of the things we need to get better at, or that we're praying about how to structure and organize, is if all of that's true, because the other part of this saying is if everybody gets to play, then everybody deserves the opportunity to be trained or taught, right? So one of the things that we want to do, if you had time to go to Ephesians, it talks about equipping the saints for the work of ministry. I have appreciated the way many of you have commented, you know, hey, your preaching's a little better than it used to be. And I'm grateful for that, right? But my main purpose is not to just like inspire you so you feel good. I want to move towards equipping you so that you're prepared to do the work. And so we don't have time to develop that fully this morning, but when we talk about what's the plan, that's part of the plan. We want to be the kind of community and the kind of church where we equip everybody to do the work. Have you heard this idea or this phrase of giving ministry away? Because I'll be honest, there's always a temptation for a pastor or a leader, the person who might be holding the mic, to say, well, you know, I'll look good if I do most of it, right? Like if I go out and do whatever it looks like and I bring in the most people and, you know, and I give all of the ministry work, like you can, I can, any person in this spot can make themselves seem more important. We want to push back against that by giving ministry away, by letting other people be involved, because we all have the same spirit. And if we get equipped and trained, then we can do it. All right?